Where are they now? This place was once the wealthiest black community in America, but after a horrific event, the entire town was wiped out. And this is why. The Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was known as Black Wall Street because it had more millionaires per square mile than any other place in the country. It had everything a person could ever need. There were doctors, lawyers, banks, clothing stores, jewelry stores, barbershops, restaurants. Anything a person could ever need could be found right there on Black Wall Street. The people who lived here were successful business owners and community leaders, teachers, preachers, and politicians. They lived in large homes with manicured lawns and were able to send their kids to college. They even had their own hospital, which at the time was unheard of. The Greenwood Hospital was built during the height of segregation, so when white doctors refused to treat black patients, the black community created their own health center. But how did they become so wealthy? Well, after slavery was abolished, black people began to migrate from the South to Oklahoma. They hoped to find better lives for themselves and their children, and while most of them didn't have much money, they had something even more valuable, and that was hope. Hope for a better future. Hope for a brighter tomorrow, and they were willing to work hard to make that happen. They started businesses and became entrepreneurs. They saved their money and invested it back into the community, and slowly but surely they built up Black Wall Street. However, all of that changed on May 31st, 1921. It was a hot summer night in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The streets were crowded with people just trying to enjoy themselves, but then suddenly everything changed. A young white man named Dick Rowland got into an elevator with a young black woman named Sarah Page. He was a mechanic and she was working as a domestic servant. But instead of just riding the elevator together in silence, Dick did something terrible. He laid his hand on Sarah's knee. She screamed and tried to get away, but he wouldn't let her. Now, we don't know exactly what happened in that elevator that day. We can only go by what the witnesses said. And they told a wild story. Apparently, Sarah pushed Dick in the face and then called him a racial slur. Then he slapped her and tried to kiss her. Some people say that Sarah may have actually hit Dick first, but no one knows for sure. What we do know is that when the elevator reached Sarah's floor, she stepped out and immediately ran to the nearest phone to call the police. She told them that she had been assaulted and begged them to come quickly. Meanwhile, Dick was freaking out. He knew that what he had done was wrong, and he was scared that Sarah would accuse him of assault. So he called his friend, a local newspaper editor named J.B.A. Moore, and he told him everything that had happened. Now, it's important to remember that this was the early 1900s, and things were very different back then. The Ku Klux Klan was still active, and lynchings were common. In fact, just a few years earlier, a black man named Elias Adams had been lynched in Tulsa for simply being in the wrong place at the right time. So when Dick told JB what had happened, the editor knew that he had to do something to protect his friend. He published a story in the local paper that said that Sarah had made the whole thing up and that Dick was a hero for defending himself against her advances. Now, this really upset the black community. They knew that Dick had done something wrong and they were angry that he was being praised for it. On top of that, they knew that Sarah had been assaulted and they were furious that nobody was doing anything to help her. So a group of black men got together and decided to take matters into their own hands. They marched down to the courthouse and demanded that Dick be arrested, but the sheriff refused. He was a white man, and he didn't want to upset the white community by arresting a white man for assaulting a black woman. So the black men had no choice but to do something drastic. They broke into the courthouse and took Dick out back. Then they beat him up and left him for dead. Now, it's important to remember that the police had done nothing to help Sarah or protect Dick. So, when news of the beating spread, most people didn't feel bad for Dick. They were actually angry at the police for not doing anything. However, the white community was not happy about what had happened. They felt that the black community had humiliated them and they wanted revenge. An angry mob of white men gathered together and began burning down the businesses on Black Wall Street. They looted homes and destroyed entire city blocks. It was like a war zone. Homes were set on fire. People were beaten up and entire families were run out of town. The black community was completely caught off guard. They had never experienced anything like this before, and they didn't know how to defend themselves. As the mob grew, they began to target some of the wealthiest people on Black Wall Street. They killed Dr. A.J. Smitherman, who was one of the founders of the Greenwood district. They also killed Sheriff Bob Curtis, who had refused to arrest Dick. And they even killed Mayor Roscoe Dungy, who had done everything he could to protect his community. The worst part was that the police didn't try to stop them. They just stood by and watched as the mob burned down everything in sight. After the dust had settled, the Greenwood district was in ruins. More than 60 city blocks had been burned, 10,000 people were homeless, and 300 businesses had been destroyed. The entire community was in shock. They couldn't believe what had happened. They had worked so hard to build up Black Wall Street, and now it was all gone. In the aftermath of the riot, 12 black men were arrested and put on trial for the death of Dick Rowland. It was a sham trial. All of the evidence pointed to Dick being at fault, but the jury still found the black men guilty. They were sentenced to between 2 and 10 years in prison. The Greenwood district would never be the same again. Most of the people who had lived there moved away, and the businesses that had been destroyed never reopened. To this day, no one knows exactly what started that fire. But what we do know is that it was a tragic event that should never have happened. It was a reminder of the racism and violence that African Americans faced in this country. What's amazing is that even after all of this, the black community rebuilt their lives. They started new businesses and raised new families. They continued to work hard and strive for success. And they never gave up hope. After the massacre, many of the survivors left Tulsa and never returned. Those that stayed behind were left traumatized by the experience. For decades, the massacre was not even taught in schools. It was swept under the rug as if it never even happened. But eventually the truth came out, and people began to learn about what had happened on Black Wall Street. Today, there's a museum and a memorial park dedicated to the Greenwood district. Every year on June, people gather together to remember those who were killed and to celebrate the legacy of Black Wall Street. It's a reminder of the strength and resilience of the black community. Despite all of the setbacks they have faced, they have always been able to rebuild and come back stronger than ever before. Black Wall Street is a testament to that. It was a thriving community filled with successful business owners, teachers, preachers, politicians, and everyday people just trying to live their lives. It was a place where black people were able to achieve the American dream, and for a while it seemed like nothing could stop them. But then disaster struck and it was all taken away. Yet, despite all of that, the black community was not broken. They rebuilt their lives and started over. They never gave up hope. And that is why we should remember the Greenwood district, not just for what was lost, but for what was gained. Because in the end, that is what matters most. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the Duel of Concepts. We will see you in the next video.